My husband arrived at my front door with his girlfriend and her 5-year-old son, then told me to sign the divorce papers and get out of the house my father built. He was so certain the property belonged to him that he did not even notice how strange it was that my 17-year-old son was staring at him in disbelief. Then Tyler quietly asked his father one question. "Dad, you really do not know?" I wish I could say I immediately understood what Tyler meant, but I did not. I was standing there holding the divorce folder, looking at Roy as he pointed toward the driveway like he was already planning his next move. Chelsea stood beside him looking nervous, while little Eli kept staring at our porch swing. Roy seemed completely confident, almost smug, and that confidence was about to disappear in front of all of us. "My name is Marilyn. I was 46 when this happened, and until that evening, I thought the worst thing my husband could do to me was cheat. I was wrong. Roy and I had been married for nearly 20 years. We had a son together, built a routine around work and family, and lived in the same Ohio house where I had grown up. What Roy did not understand was that the house had a history he had never bothered to learn. My father built that house in 1987 on land that had belonged to his family for years. He was a contractor, so almost every part of the place carried his fingerprints, from the structure itself to the cabinets in the kitchen. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, everything happened quickly. He knew he was running out of time, so he contacted his longtime attorney, Gerald Petrovsky, and made one decision that I barely understood at the time. Dad wanted the house placed into a family trust. He told me he wanted it protected for me and Tyler, regardless of what happened in the future. He was not accusing Roy of anything. He was simply thinking ahead. I signed the documents, and Roy signed several forms too, including a quitclaim. He was more interested in getting back to work than reading legal paperwork. I never imagined that careless signature would become the most important piece of paper in my marriage. My father died that spring. A few months later, the house was officially transferred into the Whitfield Family Trust, with me as trustee and Tyler as the future beneficiary. Roy knew the paperwork existed, but apparently never understood what it meant. For the next 15 years, he casually called the property our house, and during arguments he sometimes called it his house. I never corrected him, because there had never been a reason to fight over something that seemed so settled. Then I discovered the affair. It had been going on for almost a year with a woman named Chelsea, who worked at the same insurance agency as Roy. I found out because a message appeared on our shared tablet while he was taking a shower. There was no dramatic confrontation. I sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the screen, and tried to understand how the person I trusted had been living a second life without me knowing. Roy moved into an apartment 3 weeks later. He told people we had simply grown apart. I stayed quiet because Tyler was finishing high school, applying to colleges, and trying to hold himself together. Our home became strangely peaceful. We watched television on Sunday nights, ate dinner together, and avoided talking about the empty space Roy had left behind. For a while, I thought the divorce would be painful but straightforward. Then Roy started talking about my house. At first, his messages sounded almost reasonable. He said Chelsea and her son needed stability. He suggested that Tyler and I find an apartment closer to school while he helped us relocate. Then his tone changed. He told me the house was still partly his and that I needed to accept reality. I forwarded every message to Gerald. He read them and calmly told me that Roy could believe whatever he wanted, but his belief did not change the legal ownership. I asked Gerald whether I should tell Roy about the trust before things became worse. Gerald gave me advice I did not fully appreciate at the time. He said that people who are completely convinced they are right rarely search for proof that they are wrong. I decided to stay quiet. Maybe Roy would finally speak to a lawyer. Maybe he would read the documents he had signed 15 years earlier. Instead, 3 weeks later, he showed up at my house with Chelsea and Eli. It was just after 6 in the evening, and dinner was still on the stove. Roy stood on my porch holding divorce papers and told me to sign them and leave. He called the house his, as if saying it loudly enough would make it true. Chelsea looked uncomfortable, but she did not stop him. Eli was holding her hand and staring at the porch swing. For one exhausted second, I almost reached for the folder because I wanted the confrontation to end. Then Tyler walked out from the hallway wearing his work shirt from the hardware store. He looked at Roy, then at Chelsea, then at Eli. His expression was not anger. It was disbelief. He asked his father whether he truly did not know. Roy frowned and demanded an explanation. Tyler did not give him one. He turned around, walked to the hall closet, and returned carrying a dark green leather binder. I knew the binder contained copies of my father's trust documents, but I did not know Tyler had kept it there. Months earlier, after I filed for divorce, he had quietly asked Gerald for a copy because he was worried Roy might eventually try to claim the house. Tyler had never told me. Now he handed that binder to his father. Roy opened it expecting another delay, but within seconds his confidence started disappearing. He read the trust agreement. Then he read the property records. Then he found the quitclaim bearing his own signature. Finally, he looked at me and said the house had been placed into a trust years earlier. I reminded him that he had signed the paperwork himself at my father's kitchen table. He insisted nobody had explained it. I told him the attorney had explained it. He simply had not paid attention, because he never believed the information would matter. For 15 years, Roy had acted like the owner of a property that legally belonged to the trust. Now he was standing on that property demanding that its trustee leave. He asked whether he really had no claim to the house. I told him the house was not marital property and that he could ask his own attorney if he wanted another opinion. Chelsea had gone completely silent. I could almost see her realizing that the future they had imagined depended on a house they were never going to get. Roy looked at me and accused me of knowing the truth all along. I told him I had not made him believe anything. He had chosen to assume. That was the hardest part of the entire moment. I expected to feel victorious, but I did not. I felt tired. I was watching the man who betrayed me realize that the second life he had built was standing on an illusion. Even Chelsea looked shaken, while Eli only wanted to go home. Roy closed the binder and said this was not over. I told him he could discuss everything else with Gerald. He left with Chelsea and Eli, and I watched their car disappear down the road. Tyler stayed beside me on the porch. After several seconds, he asked if I was okay. I told him I did not know yet. He nodded, and somehow that was enough. Neither of us needed to pretend the night had been a victory. The legal process afterward was much quieter than Roy had expected. His attorney confirmed the trust was valid, and the house was removed from the divorce dispute. Gerald also had records of missed child support payments and a period when Roy had allowed Tyler's health insurance to lapse without telling me. There were no dramatic accusations, just dates, documents, and numbers. Roy never truly apologized. He told relatives that the trust was a technicality and that I had always been controlling about money. Eventually, even his mother learned the full story. She apologized for believing only what Roy had told everyone and asked whether she could still be part of Tyler's life. I agreed because Tyler did not need to carry anger that belonged to his father. Roy and Chelsea ended up renting a smaller place near the interstate. I did not celebrate that. Their situation was no longer my responsibility. For the first time in years, I could finally look at my own life without waiting for another crisis. Tyler graduated and was accepted into Ohio State to study finance. One evening, I asked him why he had kept the green binder hidden for so long. He told me he did not want me worrying unless I actually needed it. He said he figured that someday his father would push too hard, and we would need proof. I waited until Tyler went upstairs before I cried. My son had been quietly protecting the future my father had tried to protect years before. Today, the house is still standing. The same porch swing sits outside, the same kitchen holds the same memories, and the same walls my father built still surround me and Tyler. Sometimes I think about Eli staring at that porch on the night Roy brought him there. I do not blame that little boy for anything. I only hope that someday someone gives him the kind of stability my father wanted for us, and teaches him that a home is more than four walls. I used to think my father's trust was just paperwork created by a frightened man who knew he was dying. Now I understand it differently. He was not trying to control the future. He was trying to protect the people he loved from whatever the future might bring. He could never have known that one day the person he was protecting us from would be the man standing on that porch demanding that I leave. Roy spent 15 years believing the house was his. In the end, all it took was one green binder to show him that it never was. If this story hit home, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more.